Hey guys, so today I want to talk about ranking up in Rainbow Six Siege. Now I know that sounds pretty trivial. You're probably saying, yeah, I rank up all the time. You just play the game, and when you win games, you rank up. But there's a lot of things that can be done differently in Rainbow Six Siege, and a lot of things that a lot of people generally don't know about. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at some of those, and then we're going to talk about what you can do to make your team better as a whole. If you're solo or duo queued, the things that you can do maybe differently or similarly that should lead to better results in your ranked games. So let's go ahead and get into the settings. Now, you can turn on your display performance matrix. That's going to show you things like your frames per second, whether or not you're getting like stutters, your ping, stuff like that. Can be important. Just let you know whether or not you have something to diagnose on the back end that's not necessarily going to provide you with the most fluid gameplay. So that one is one that you can have on, and depending on how you feel like you're playing, it can help you diagnose whether or not your game is having problems or whether you're just not performing the way you want to. Now, one of the other tips for me is to think about when you're playing the game, right? You've been in the community for long enough while you're playing the game that you probably know that having all chat on isn't going to always be smiles, and it's not going to be like lighthearted jokes. It's going to be a lot of people being really toxic and flaming you. So you can always disable all of your text chats or just set it to your team. If you're a person that wants to type, the first tip is to resist the urge to type. The reason being, if you're typing, right, that means that you're not providing much value to your team. If you're busy typing to the enemy team, that is. If you're typing to your team, it's better than nothing, right? So if you die on Oregon and Big Tower because someone is, I don't know, just camping there and you misdroned, or maybe they went there after you droned, if you say nothing, that guy is probably going to have flank of the century that round and probably kill the rest of your team. But even if you can't verbally say Vigil's T3 of Tall Tower, right, you could still type out Vigil T3 Big Tower, right? Or you can type Vigil Big Tower, or just Big Tower in general, right? And that's going to probably help your team immensely. Now, I will say that a lot of people are not very good at reading and playing the game at the same time. I am not excluded from that. So I actually keep on the text to speech. So when you go into your accessibility, I have convert text to voice, so that way the game can tell me, so I don't have to keep looking from the center of the screen to the bottom of the screen. I find it to be easier. You obviously don't need to convert voice to text. That's not super great. I do recommend having a transparent chat background though. It just makes it so that if there's something in the corner, if someone who's spectating, you can see it, or if you're spectating someone else and you can see it, you can call them out better than if the text chat is flooding and you just physically can't see it. So I recommend doing that. One of the more important things is your team color. And the reason your team color is important is because your gadgets are going to match the color of your team. So for me, I recommend doing either orange or red for your team color, because you don't need to see your team gadgets, right? Think about when they initiated the Valk change and the cameras went from having no halo to a really bright blue halo, and it made them very, very noticeable. Now think about that with Melusi Wubs, motion detectors, Wamaya gadgets, Echo drones. Everything's going to have a bright blue light if you choose the opposing team color as blue, which is going to make it really easy for you to know, hey, that's really bright blue, I got to shoot that thing. So I recommend the opposing team is blue because that's the brightest color and it blends in the least on most maps. And the team color being orange or red because you don't really need to see if something's your gadget or not. Mind you, when you're pinging things, the ping will match the color of the team that it's for. So like if they have a Mozzie and you see a drone, a lot of time drones don't show the lights on them for some reason this season. When you ping it, the ping will be red if it's your team's and blue if it's the other team. So if you're not sure, just ping the gadget and that'll be able to let you know. But with Brava hacking, you do get the little flourish around there that should let you know that it's the attacking teams. And if it's, you know, a defender gadget. The nickname doesn't really matter too much. A lot of people use stat trackers, so if you're trying to just play a game and not have people like figure out who you are and look up your stats and flame you in chat, you're best off to just probably turn off chat, because the privacy stuff doesn't really matter unless you're trying to like avoid Q sniping. For controls, you're going to be able to find all sorts of different stuff everywhere about it, basically talking about sensitivity, ADS sensitivity, all the different magnification sensitivities and stuff like that. All I'm going to say is find what works well for you. I always recommend a lower DPI with a lower sense, because as you can see my mouse here, right, I can make a linear movement and I can make small little micro adjustments, right? The higher your sensitivity is, the bigger those movements end up being, and the smaller refinements will go out of existence. So if you're trying to go from a person's, let's say the person's head is sensitivity, and I'm here, if I play with a high DPI, you physically might not be able to move your mouse slow or small enough distance to actually get to that point. You might go from here all the way to here and just back and forth, and you're not going to be able to actually get it to where you need it to be to try and hit that headshot. One other tip that I have while on the controls, this is just me personally, I know a lot of people do it differently. Again, you're going to find what works for you, but I've found it useful in the past years of playing this game to not have my lean buttons on my mouse. I found that my aim improved when my lean buttons were something that I used on my keyboard. When I used buttons on my mouse, I found that my aim would stagger because I was using my lean buttons on my mouse. So just keep that in mind. That might be something that can help your gameplay too. In terms of graphics, it's all just going to come down to whatever you want it to be. There's plenty of websites that I'll put in the description that will tell you different graphics settings. I'll put the one that I used. It'll basically just tell you everything. When it comes to the display, you're going to want to try and set it to the most optimal settings. Now, everyone knows that full screen and borderless appear similar, but borderless locks the refresh rate. I don't necessarily see an issue when I'm playing with the locked refresh rate. The game still tells me that I'm making like 200 frames. So I don't see borderless as an issue for me, but a lot of people do play full screen for that reason. For aspect ratio, I recommend 4:3 for anyone. The reason being 4:3 makes the center of your screen more zoomed in. It's going to make it easier to see things from further away, especially since a lot of guns only have the 1x now. Just helps broaden the picture a bit. VSync, you're going to want off. FPS limit, you know, you can set lower, but there's no reason to not have it at its max. And then your FOV, you definitely don't want it to be at 60. You want it to be somewhere in the 83 to 90 range, just depending on how you're used to playing. And then in terms of audio, this is going to be the #1 tip for audio. Use night mode. Use night mode, use night mode, use night mode. If you take anything away from this video, it is to play the game with night mode on. And I'm going to show you why. When we mouse over the dynamic range, when you look at night mode, it says least dynamic and most compressed, making all sounds intelligible even at low volumes. What does that mean? That means footsteps are going to be louder. That means gunshots are going to be quieter. That means if you have a cav on a map who is sprinting at you with silent step on, you will hear her. You just will. You might have to turn your game volume up a bit, but you will hear her. You will hear her, and you will be able to get that kill that you would have thought was impossible before. I recommend night mode to everyone, no matter what level of playing experience you have, whether you like playing for fun or whether you like playing competitively or whether you just really want to be a rank star, because night mode will let you hear way more than you're used to hearing. You'll hear everything from all sorts of different corners of the map, and you'll be able to have glorious callouts, immaculate callouts, because you'll be able to just tell them like, hey, I hear someone in room halfway across the map, or it sounds like this thing, this place, right? You're going to hear gadgets getting in place. You're going to be able to differentiate between different types of gunshots a lot more clearly with night mode on. So I recommend night mode to everyone. Every single person recommend night mode to. When it comes to HUD, it's just personal preference. A lot of the stuff I have turned off because I've been playing the game forever and I like feeling a lot of the stuff I've had turned off for forever because I like the feeling of knowing what I'm hearing, what I'm interacting with, and having that better depth inside my head and being able to put that forward towards the match. Okay, so that's everything in the settings. Now you're probably thinking, okay, that's cool. I changed a couple settings, but I'm still not having the best gameplay. What are things that I can do differently? Or why can't I rank up? Those are probably the two different things that you're probably thinking, right? And one of the things that you can do differently is in any game ever, you can call out, right? You're going to see that having someone like Valkyrie to provide intel, Solas to provide intel, right? These are things that can matter. They can make a difference. The difference maker is generally going to be when you have people that are giving the information, right? Now, if you have a Valkyrie and the Valkyrie is just not calling anything out, it's obviously not going to be advantageous for you, right? What's the point of having the information if you're not getting the information or communicating the information to everyone so that way that the information can be acted upon, right? So one of the first things that you want to think about while you're playing a game is, what can I do to make this better for my team, right? And I know not a lot of people like to necessarily talk while they're there, right? But we hear big windows open. We saw a big window was open. So all you have to do is say at least one big window, right? It's not a super heavy call out. We don't know who it is. We don't know if they're tagged. We don't know if they're injured, right? Any of that stuff. But we know that one is there. So we know that when we're walking through site or when we're walking back and forth, right? That's something that we need to be careful of, is one person who's sitting outside the big window, so that way that we don't cross into their line of fire. So that way that maybe we can, you know, maybe we can avoid them, or at least be cautious of them, be aware of them, right? So that's super important. Now for the Azami, who is dealing with quite a lot, right? She can at this point call that there's a Flores. She can call that there's one in Master because she hears them punching the thing in Master. She can call out Master Balk because she also saw the Master Balk. She can call second Flores drone down, right? Keeping track of enemy gadgets is not always the most beneficial thing in the entire world, but knowing that this person is out of usable gadget can be useful to you. It can change how you attempt to sight, right? If you know that there's a hard breacher left, right, you're going to play the game differently because you're going to know that you need to make sure that walls are still closed, right? If walls get opened, that's something that, again, needs to get communicated, right? We just saw Solas on the screen die to Master. When you're in that death cam, right, you can tell how many people are in Master. So you can know, hey, there's 3 Master. The Azami, when she died, right, we can know, hey, Ash was Attic, right? And we have these Val cams, right? So let's try and go back a little bit. So in this match replay, right, we know that Ash is pushing Trophy, right? Because she comes this way, swings, and shoots the Azami, right? We have the information there. Jaeger could be holding a different angle to help cover it. When I go to swing it, I don't see anyone there, and so I look at a different door and I get like refragged instantly. So me being able to communicate like, hey, Ash is in whatever room, right? That's gonna make a bit of difference for the Jaeger. He's gonna know what to play differently. Now granted, he's in a 3v1 with one on breach, one swinging the holes, and then Ash rushing him, so it's not exactly the best situation, but he's gonna understand like he can play back a little bit. We have this Valk camera here still, so we have intel on at least one of them and audio on another, and then we know that wall is open, so he should know that like he can still rotate up and around. He can maybe go for the guy who's going to plant in a second, because as you see, there's no defuser down, right? So just keep that in mind, that providing information to your team is invaluable. Whether it's through text, through callouts, it's going to bring some value to them. No matter what, they are going to get value from the things that you say, even if they're not 100% accurate, right? It's okay to be wrong, right? It's also something that should be recognized that you won't necessarily be wrong. Now, what I mean by that is when you make a call out, right? That call out is in the moment, right? When you call that Ash is white stairs, or when you call out that someone is on some location, right? That is at that specific moment, they are there. Everyone can do better by recognizing that people have legs. When you give a call out, the second that call out comes out, you should know that they could be anywhere within X amount of feet based on the time that you gave, unless they are constantly pinging them. And even if they're constantly pinging them, because there's such a delay on pings, it is not always 100% accurate, and you're going to have to learn how to anticipate that, right? That's what they call a game sense, right? So having game sense is important, and knowing like, okay, if the ping is here, 5 seconds elapsed, they can be a whole different room away now, right? Especially if it's a roamer, they could be very, very far away. So keep in mind, callouts are in the moment, but you should still give callouts, right? Your team can make different strategies in their head on the fly, and they can play a more improv game if they know where someone is or isn't, right? If they know that someone isn't in main lobby and the plant is down and they are trying to push down a funnel, knowing that they could rotate out in down to a different angle could make the difference for that game, right? Especially in 1v1s, when almost all the information is guesswork or through cameras or gadgetry that's set up like drones, bulletproofs, maestro cams, motion detectors, defaults, all of that stuff, right? All of that stuff is going to be super important, but it's even more important if you can hear them and the other person is looking in a bad direction, right? Let them know that you can hear them where you hear them. And again, it's okay to be wrong. It's fine. They might flame you for it, but like, what are they gonna do, right? If you hear them somewhere and they're looking somewhere else, if they know that they're there, they're not gonna look where you told them. If they don't know that they're there, they're gonna look where you told them, because you're giving them information that they didn't have, right? If they heard them there, they would be looking there. They obviously don't hear them, or don't hear them where you hear them, and so they're either going to look where you hear them because they don't hear them, or they're not going to look where you hear them because they hear them somewhere else, and they're going to like trust themselves more. And it's a coin flip. They might be more right, you might be more right. When it comes to audio, perspective is very different, and understanding like how the audio works in the game is very complex, and you're not always going to have like a perfect replay of what's going on there. But that brings me to another thing that I want to talk about. Toxicity, right? It's very often that if you say something and you're wrong, they will be toxic. The solution is just mute them. Just straight up. Just mute them. Don't tell them. Just mute them. Still give your call outs, right? If you want to win the game, still keep doing what you're doing. If they don't want your callouts, they can mute you, right? But if you are confident in what you're doing, if you've been playing the game, if you have drones places, call it out. Whether they listen to you or not, that's up to them, but you can call it out. Now, I know that you're probably thinking, why would I want to mute them if they give me a call out? I'm not going to be able to hear it. I'm handicapping myself. Well, one of the big differences that you can notice between people playing ranked and the people that do this in Pro League is that when playing the game, Pro League players are able to keep their head even when things go wrong. They have an IGL who is calling out everything all round long for them, right? And they aren't going to be right 100% of the time, but you have to trust that they're going to say the right thing. If it goes wrong, you move on. You just go to the next round. You say, cool, like it's good. We'll get it next round, right? But what happens in ranked or with like, you know, solo queue especially, is people want to argue about who's right, what the right thing to do was, and like there's a time and place for it. It's fine, but generally speaking, if you know something, act on the information that you know. If they're telling you other stuff to support that information, great. If they're telling you contradictory stuff, then, you know, do what you feel is best. But if you think that something is right, then do that thing. And even if you lose the round, you know, it's okay. There's more rounds to be had. It's a learning process. This game is a learning process. And you can't let people who've been playing it more or less time dictate how you play, right? If you are the best sound whore in the game, you're going to be able to hear everything, everyone, everywhere. And you're going to be able to tell people like, hey, this is this thing, this is this thing. And hopefully, if you're not the world's best gunner, they can gun out for you, right? But you need to understand that like, it's okay. It's okay to not have the best gun skill. It's okay to not know callouts. It's okay to like lose a round. But at least communicate with your team. Right? Communication is super important because even if they're all dead and you're asking them for additional information, if they're able to provide you with that information, you might be able to clutch out a round, right? There's a phrase that goes on in my Discord. We call it drone time ain't phone time. And basically what that means is during prep phase, after you die, if you're playing the game and you want to rank up, don't go on your phone when you die. Don't go on your phone between rounds. Like, play the game, set up a drone somewhere that's going to be really good. Try and learn some drone spots. There's plenty of channels that can teach you that, like Dangleberries, Coconut Bro. There's so many people that have nutty drone angles that you could learn. Just look up some of those videos, learn some cool drone spots. If your drone gets shot, that's okay. So be it. At least you were able to try and put your drone somewhere that gives you information later in the game, right? And if it does give you information later in the game and it can win you the round, that's great. The other option is just bring your drone to spawn and then set up 2 drones during the round. It takes a little bit more time, but you shouldn't be on your phone or watching YouTube or doing something else while your team is relying on you for information. For example, if you're in a 4v1 or if you have 4 people alive against 5 people or just 4vx really, right? The first person who dies, if they go on their phone, right, and the enemy team just isn't shooting cameras or you have bulletproof or Valcam, Echo drone, any of that stuff, and you're defending and that person is just letting them walk straight by the cameras, then like that's intel lost. You might not necessarily have people watching that angle, and then you might get shot in the back of the head, right? And then you're in a 3vx or 2vx or 1vx, just like how that Ash rushed in Oregon a few moments ago, right? So having that information is important. It is a very information-based game. So even if you have 2 people dead, right? If you have 2 people dead, you can have 2 different angles watched. And those 2 different angles watched means that 2 people can have their guns watching different angles. You guys have probably played this game long enough to know that there's so many angles in every map because of soft destruction, because of hard destruction. You can open up so many different lines of sight that aren't always permanent, but having that information can really, 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 really change the outcome of a game. So if you're dead, just keep playing the game. It's probably boring, but like, you're going to find that your team will have more success if you go on cams after you die, if you give callouts after you die, if you are spectating someone who isn't communicating and communicating for them, right? Again, these are all just various different things that you can do to ensure that communication is open in your team and everyone is making as best informed decisions as they can, right? If you're making a decision and you have no idea where 5 people are and you're in a 1v5, odds are you're probably going to die. Because if you walk into a room and you don't know that there's 2 people holding an angle for that doorway, you get fucking fried. You, right? But if you know that one person is holding an angle, you can pre-fire that guy. And then when the other guy goes to swing you for the refrag, you maybe get lucky and have the game sense and the wherewithal to process that fight in audio at that current moment in time, and maybe you get him too, and then you're in a 1v3, which is much more winnable than a 1v5, right? And then if just one single teammate catches a glimpse of one person on a camera and you know where they are, you know either what to push or what to avoid, because you're wanting to single those fights out. You want to get as many 1v1s as possible until you get down to a 1v1, win that, and defuse the bomb, assumingly, right? It's super possible. Every situation is winnable to some extent, in some way, shape, or form. Keep in mind that you have utility, you have grenades, you have impact nades, you have C4, you have flashbangs, you have smokes. You have so much different utility, whether you're attacking or defending. When you're in these 1v whatevers, you can either use them as decoys, as bait, get them for kills. You could do so many different things that can save the round for your team with that gadgetry. But you have to have some sort of information on what to do with it. If you're flashing an empty room, you're wasting a flash, right? If you are fragging an empty room, you're down 1 frag, when instead you could use that to clear a pathway for yourself, or to trap someone who you know where they are, and you can throw the frag to force them to run away so that you can try and shoot them as they're sprinting away, right? So keep that in mind. You can do so much with so little in this game, but you have to be willing to actually play the game. So I just want to summarize everything for you guys. A lot of the settings are great, but the number 1 priority is night mode. And the number 2 priority, arguably the number 1 priority for the gameplay, is staying focused on the game. If you give your callouts in ranked, whether they're right or wrong, your communication will be invaluable to the team, because they'll either know what to push or what not to push. And those 3 things, being able to hear the audio more clearly in the game, having an idea of where to and not to push from, as well as open communication with your team, that will change whether or not your team wins. And by creating and fostering that positive environment on your team with callouts, right? If you do that every single game, you'll find more likely than not that people are more receptive to that. If they're not receptive to it, you just go next. Just go next game. Like I said, you can always mute people. You don't have to listen to them, get mad or flame you or whatever. Just give your comms, whatever your best version of those are. If you want an example of them, what I'm going to do is I'm going to record a full game of me playing the way that I would play with my comms, and I'm going to upload that, and I'm going to give you guys the ability to see what I do and how I hear things and how I play the game if you don't already check it out on the Twitch channel. But I really think that those things can change how well you play, and making sure that you don't try to frustrate your team more or egg them on more or troll them or whatever to change the team mood. You want to try and keep it as positive of an environment as possible with the most communication as you can. And that's going to be your key to success. Having that communication, being able to act on the communication, having as much information as possible. Those are the things, those are the core fundamental things that you need in this game to succeed and to be able to rank up.